I just want to say welcome back, and we're glad you're here. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and share. Today we have a really exciting podcast for you. We've got a special guest. Her name is Tiffany Boyd, and she runs the For Your Children homeschool page. She is a fighter of freedoms. She is a fighter for all homeschool families. She wants to keep it as regulation free as possible.
Mm-hmm. She's kind of an advocate in legislation for homeschoolers.
Yes. This actually has been rescheduled, this interview, because she's had things come up in legislation where she'd had to run to the state capitol on the day where we had planned to kind of talk about it. So we're really excited to have her here today. And we're going to be talking about the Voucher program that was up for vote in Tennessee. She is against it, and so we just kind of wanted to get her opinion on what she's seeing at the Capitol, what's going on with the voucher, what could be, pros and cons of it, and
like from a black and white perspective, like when I first heard about voucher, you only see the good, right?
Right. Like, ooh, $7,000 for school supplies?
And I just like all the opportunities. I was just telling Lindsay, all the opportunities like our kids could have with that amount of money in education per year. Is it per year?
Per year, yeah. All right, we want to welcome our special guest today. Her name is Tiffany Boyd. She is the founder of For Your Children. She is an amazing resource here in Tennessee. If you have any questions, I highly suggest you reach out to her. Thanks for joining us today, Tiffany. She's here to talk to us today about the voucher bill that was just going through legislation. It does sound like this bill has been dropped right now, but we'll kind of get into that. Tiffany, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Do you homeschool? How did you get into this?
Sure. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great morning here in Tennessee. This is actually our 20th year of homeschooling.
Wow.
So, my children are very happy that we are winding down our school year for this year. So they're looking forward to summer break, getting a little bit of spring fever. But the beauty of homeschooling is you can take breaks as needed.
Right.
And you can do school outside. So although it's warming up here, and I think we're going to have an obnoxiously hot summer, if this is any indication of how things are, the trajectory of how things are going. So I'm not sure if your listeners or your viewers are familiar with me at all, but I am actually a former public school teacher. So I was a tenured public school teacher when we made the decision to begin our homeschooling journey all those years ago. And I was very resistant to it at first. It was not my decision to actually homeschool our children. I've shared this story a lot. My husband and I still laugh at it because I say it's one of the few times that I submitted to him. Because it was actually his idea to start homeschooling. We had just had our third child. We have 5 now, but at the time we had just had our third child, and I was still, employed as a public school teacher. Again, I was tenured, and back then that was the gold standard of what every teacher was trying to achieve, was tenured status. And so I had taken a leave of absence, obviously, with the new baby, and we had our older 2 children in the public school system still. And there were a lot of issues that we were experiencing. Of course, we had a new baby, and that was making it difficult because our children were enrolled in a school that was about 30 minutes away from our home. So we had made a decision to move them into a different school system, which was closer to where we lived. And that wasn't working out for our family at all. Our oldest daughter was experiencing bullying issues in the school. There was a staffing problem in the school. And my husband had just had enough. And he said, okay, this is it. You're just going to pull her out and homeschool her. And I was like, oh, are you kidding me? I still had all of the all the misconceptions that especially a lot of people that have been educated in the public school system. And then those of us who went on to become public school educators still believed a lot of the misconceptions about homeschooling. And I was one of those people. And he kept saying, this is ridiculous. You can do this at home. So we took the leap and we removed her. We left our oldest son at the time in the public school system for another year. And then we pulled him out. So if you have listeners, viewers that are watching this, listening to this podcast, the first piece of advice I would give them is do not do what I did. So if you're going to take the leap, just get them all out. Yep. At the same time, if you have more than one child. And then because I was educated as a teacher, I did all the things wrong when I first began that journey. And the biggest thing right out of the bat was I tried to recreate the public school system in my house.
Right.
Because that's what I knew about education. And so that was a disaster, as you can imagine. So I do not recommend that. I actually tell parents, if your children have been in the public school system before and you're removing them, if you have been educated in an institutionalized style of learning, such as public school or private school, the very first thing that you should do is deschool.
Uh-huh. we just did an episode on that.
Yeah, and it's not, so link that episode down in the comments of this one so they can go back and look into what deschooling is. And it's just as important, if not more so, for the parents to deschool as it is the children. So I recommend, several books for parents to read, because you're going to need to unlearn everything you thought you knew about education in order to be able to make this the enjoyable experience that it should be. I've said this over and over again, homeschooling is just an extension of parenting. But because the school system has conditioned parents to believe that they're not equipped, they can't do it. It has to be done in the confines of a classroom, certain hours of the day, certain days of the week. You have to use a certain curriculum. It has to be executed a certain way. None of that is true.
Right.
As a matter of fact, that's not what education is to begin with. So it's really hard for parents, especially if they have been institutionalized, if they have been indoctrinated to believe that, which I was. So I'm not throwing shade at those who still may believe that. I'm saying I was one of those. And so I had to go into I'm going to use this term, it's going to sound really bad, a re-education of sorts.
Right.
For my own self, to be able to do and allow our homeschool to be what God intended it to be for our family. And so that's the first thing. So if you did a podcast on deschooling, fantastic. That's a great resource, because parents need to understand what that is. That's a term that most people have no clue what that means. And just take the time also during that time period to reconnect with your family. Most families do not know how to be a family, because our culture has segmented the family so much that what we know in America is your children turn 5 and you send them away all day long. Sometimes they get on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning and they're not home until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Parents work typically. And I've written extensively about this, because I'm also a monthly contributor to the Borough Pulse, where I have written for several years now. And all of the topics that I write about are education. And I actually covered this, and I said it gave statistics of how much time parents actually spend, quality time they spend with their children. And it was so sad, because it's like 20 minutes a day, I think.
Oh my gosh.
And, this was around the time, I'm not even sure if those statistics, yes, they were. Those statistics came out after cell phones. So uninterrupted, connected, really engaged time with our children in America is not that much, especially if they're gone the majority of the day, to a school.
Right.
And so it takes families a while to learn how to be a family again. Also, there's a lot of, the school system conditions families to not know how to family together. And so you hear people who have multiple children, families that have multiple children, say our children fight all the time. I can't ever imagine bringing them all home together, to homeschool together. Well, that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling. Once you bring them home and they get out of that environment with the peer pressure, you will see their attitudes and their behaviors begin to improve. And you can foster a love of those sibling relationships and parental relationships. So that was a long way about going around saying this. I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Don't do what I did. Listen to wise, sage people, not just myself, because I'm still learning every single day, but many other people who are trying to give you advice to help you along your journey so you don't make the same mistakes that I did in the beginning. So we did that 20 years ago. We started our journey. And throughout that journey, over the years, I would have people come to me and say, I want to remove my kids from the public school system. How do I get started? So then I was spending copious amounts of time trying to help people navigate out of the public school system. Everyone assumed that because I was a public school teacher who was now homeschooling, I had all the answers. And I'm thinking, that's funny if you only knew. So, I tell people now, don't do what I did. So that led me to create a support group. And so I created a local support group for families in Middle Tennessee. And that support group was serving upwards of 1,000 families.
Yeah.
And so we did all kinds of things. I added enrichment classes, opportunities, field trips, a service project group that we were doing. And we ran that for about 17 years. Tons of free resources for the community. And then it just began to take over, our life because during COVID really catapulted that particular support group in the homeschool community in our area, out of the park because schools shut down.
Right.
And so then the parents came home, and then after a little while, they realized, okay, so I am technically homeschooling. Why am I homeschooling? Which it wasn't really homeschooling. It was public school at home, but that's another conversation. So then they quickly decided that, I would rather just do this my way. I'm going to reach out and find people who really homeschool and ask them if they can help me navigate this. So our group exploded at that point. And then through that work, there were some things going on in Tennessee, and this was the catalyst to doing what I do now, which I still say, if someone had told me a year ago I would be doing this, I would have said, you're crazy. That's just ridiculous. What happened was during COVID, our then education commissioner, Penny Schwinn, had launched an initiative called the Wellbeing Child Check Initiative, and they had created a task force. And so when I had this support group that was up and running of around 1,000 families, one of the members of that group was also a realtor, and he had a client that was moving here from another state, and they had the foresight to go on our state website and look at what education looked like in our state before they made the decision to purchase the property or home or whatever it is they were looking at. And they found where this well-being initiative had been uploaded. And he was new to the state as well. And he sent me a message and he said, what is this? And I was like, I have no idea because that's never been there before. So then I mobilized the troops and started making phone calls. And I was speaking to a senator recently, and that senator said to me, you guys shut the switchboard down at the Capitol. And I said, that was the goal. Because what this initiative was going to allow was it was going to allow the state to come into the homes of all children, regardless of how they were being homeschooled, from birth to age 18 to perform a well-being child check. Well, those of us that had been homeschooling for years, COVID didn't affect us. We weren't shut down. Like, we were still functioning just like we had always functioned. And we certainly didn't need the state coming in to make sure we were parenting correctly.
Right.
And so originally, we started out, I read the verbiage, and the verbiage said homeschools, private schools, and public schools. And so, I mobilized all of these individuals, and some other people, stepped in after I started yelling loud enough, which is funny because that's what we're really good at, that we're not having this. So we pressured them enough. They started out, they removed the homeschooling verbiage. And I said, that is not good enough because in the state of Tennessee, the majority of homeschool families are registered under Category 4 schools. So legally, we are considered private schools. So that private school verbiage still affects us. So this isn't going to fly. So then we yelled some more, and then they went back in and amended the language again, and they removed public schools. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to go to bat here, because the state doesn't have the right to come into any parent's home, no matter how they have chosen to educate their children, without reason, just because they feel like they need to be the authority that makes the decision if these parents are parenting correctly. So we pushed back enough that that was put on a shelf. But what a lot of people don't realize is it never really went away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been hosting seminars across the state of Tennessee for almost a year now, I think. And we've been going into communities to try to educate people where all these initiatives came from, where we are now, and where it's headed. And this doesn't just affect homeschool families. This affects public school, private school, and homeschool. And what I have found through this work is very few people know anything about any of this. So when we host the seminar and I come in to speak, they are really just shocked. They like to tell me you fire hose me with information. I get accused of that a lot because it's so much. And it continues to be more and more, because this is progressive. This is a national push. It's happening all across the United States. And especially after this legislative session, we realize that we are in serious hot water in the state of Tennessee. A lot of people who have moved here to Tennessee were sold this false narrative of freedom.
Right.
And I've written extensively about this. Oh, come to Tennessee. We're free. You know, we're a conservative state. You're going to be protected. Your parental rights. Nothing could be further from the truth. And this past legislative session was, and I've lived here, I will tell you this because I'm just proud to be alive. I'm 50. And so I've lived in Tennessee my entire life, and this is the worst legislative session I have ever seen for parents and families in the state of Tennessee. And people were largely unaware of it. They have no clue what's going on. And this is all by design. I'm not trying to shame them because they don't know. What I'm saying is they need to know. We need to have a mass education, not only in the state of Tennessee, but across the nation regarding, what's happening. So jumping back to the Penny Schwinn nightmare. So we knew that particular initiative had been done pretty much, the representatives that we were speaking to said they didn't know anything about it. No one claimed to know that this had happened. I have some different theories about that. But anyway, they claimed that they had no knowledge of it and that she had been taken care of and she had been put in a box and this wouldn't happen again. Well, finally, she resigned. The education commissioner that we have now is worse, in my opinion. So if you've been watching the news, you have seen some things unfold with her. But that was really what led me to realize that I may need to shift exactly the trajectory of what I was doing. And I was getting so many questions from so many parents on a regular basis and continuing to homeschool my own children and, be a wife and a mother and run a household and do all the things that I had to make a decision. Was I going to continue running the support group, or was I going to try to do something that could create more education for more people on a larger platform? So that's when Free Your Children was formed. So it started out as just a Facebook page. And then we started getting really involved in legislation and building relationships and having conversations with our legislators, but most importantly, educating the public on what was going on. And so that was the catalyst to creating Free Your Children and why, I was already sharing some information on that page, but that was really the leap into kind of the watchdog side of what I'm doing now. And then that led to the opportunity to be able to write for the Borough Pulse when they contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to write a piece, which I did. And then that led to like a regular gig. And I appreciate them immensely because they are a very freedom-minded platform that allow the things that I share to be published in their in their paper. And so that has been a great way, to be able to reach people and educate people. And then I was offered kind of a guest appearance on a radio show at a point in time. And I stayed there for just a little while. And then I was offered to start my own radio show. So then that led to that. And now we have launched the Free Your Children television show, which we've already recorded, which we will be launching that soon. And the whole premise behind all of this is to educate parents and families so that they will be equipped with information so that they will be able to protect their parental, educational, and constitutional rights. And of course, I'm a Christian, so my ministry is a Christian ministry, and to equip them to disciple and teach their own children. So that's kind of the long story of how I got started. And then, since we jumped into the legislative arena, there have been numerous pieces of legislation that have been introduced, and it has just been heartbreaking to see it happen here in Tennessee. We are concerned. We did get a little small victory, or I should say a reprieve, this legislative session. We were working hard. I know I had been talking to you guys about coming on, and I had to reschedule because we were in the middle of the legislative session, and that's where we were spending our life. I told someone the other day, I said, my kids get an A in government and civics this semester because they can spout legislative terms like no one's business. The days that they went with me, they learned a ton. The days they weren't there and they were here with other adults that were here with them while I was doing that and helping them with their school, they would send me text messages. Has the bill been rolled? Has it been placed behind the calendar? Has it been placed behind the budget? What's going on? And our youngest is 11, and she was the one sending me those text messages. So it was a good education. And that's one thing that I would encourage everyone, if you're listening to this, take the time to take your children and let them participate in the process, because it's we all need to know. And so many people do not know how the process works. We said we were going to create like a cheat sheet of all of these terms and place it on the website. That's another thing. We also launched a website, freeyourchildren.com, where people can find us, and created a toolkit that we broke down into topics. And we're constantly revamping that and adding to it to hopefully give parents even more resources.
That's great. I didn't know that you had a website up and running.
Yeah.
I just found you. I'm in a bunch of homeschool groups. Somebody had shared a link of something you had said. Facebook, yeah. About a year ago, I think. And I've kind of just been watching you and following what you're doing for about the last year. And this bill came up, the voucher bill came up, and I watched, you did like an hour-long live talk on it, and I was like, I've got to have her on. I need all of her information, everything she has. So I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you so much.
And I love your story. It's amazing. Kristen here is also in public school.
I used to teach middle school math.
Yeah. There are a lot of us.
Yes. I feel like we got an intimate knowledge of the flaws in public school system, and it kind of changed our hearts and directions on like where we can focus, where we're passionate about, I guess, is at home in homeschool. So.
For sure, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I didn't know any of this stuff when I was a public school teacher, and they do that on purpose. Like, they're not going to go in and say, hey, here's the history of public education. It was to create worker bees. We don't want independent thinkers. Parents are not smart. We're the experts. They don't tell you. They don't tell you all those things. And that's the history of it. So it was an eye-opening experience for me. I don't know about you, but what I've found oftentimes when I'm having conversations with people who are still embedded, in that particular system, sometimes it's really hard for them to make the connection that they have been involved in a system that's propagating these things.
Right.
And I tell people, when we know better, we're supposed to do better. So I encourage them, just do the research, read some books, talk to some individuals that are knowledgeable in these areas. And, I did it. I taught for 7 years. And then after that, I ran I ran a kindergarten readiness preschool. And now I'm, totally against the things that I was participating in at that time. And it was because I didn't know any better. So I tell people all the time, it's okay. But once you know better, it's then what you do with the information that you have moving forward.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about this voucher bill? I have a friend who lives in Florida.
I was just about to mention her. Yeah.
Who she just praises it. She's like, my kids are in jiu-jitsu now and we get all this free stuff and free computers and all these things. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, And then I watched your live video on it. I'm like,
this doesn't sound
okay, there's another side to this. Like, we need to talk about the other side of this.
Well, yes, I go into deep detail about this in my seminars regarding the history of school choice, where it came from, what the reason why this plan was developed, what the long-term goals are for universal school choice. Charlotte Iserbyt, if you don't know who she is, I highly encourage you to look her up. She was the consummate whistleblower. And I'm just going to give you the cliff notes here, because again, I got accused of fire hosing people, so I'm going to try not to do that. So she was the consummate whistleblower under Ronald Reagan, where she started warning the administration and as many people as she could find what this really was, what this school choice really was. And so she worked for the U.S. Department of Education. So she was privy to all these classified documents, and that's where she uncovered this scheme. Okay. And so they eventually fired her, but she was smart enough to take those classified documents with her, and she put them all together in a book for your reading pleasure today. Charlotte has since passed. You can go back and find interviews with her on YouTube. I had the wonderful opportunity to interview a gentleman who has benefited immensely from her work. He lived with her for a time. He has written his own book. He is a wealth of information in his own right. His name's John Klizak. And so what she was trying to do was warn people, this is to advance communism. Of course, when this was happening in the 80s, the Soviet Union was still intact. And of course, now that the Soviet Union has fallen, the plan still didn't go away. It's still to advance communism. There are just more players involved at this point. So her book is called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And so I highly encourage everyone to read that book. And again, I break this down in the seminars and kind of connect the dots for people, because this is so much. It is a lot of information. And what I found is people will glean tidbits, but they couldn't really understand how it was connected like one big puzzle. So I use the seminar platform to be able to break that down and customize the seminars that we're doing for whichever area I'm going in, to say, this is where it started. This is where we are today within your own school system, within your own community, within your own state. And then this is where it's headed. And so, a lot of people don't have that information. So the voucher bill then sounds great, right? And I've been warning about this, writing about this for years and years. I've been sharing about this, especially when I realized that the push was going to come to Tennessee, because the whole goal is to do it nationwide. Okay. They want universal school choice across the world, not just the United States. So that's the goal with that. So we were waiting. About 2 years ago, I tried to start educating our legislators and parents in our community. And this was when I had the homeschool support group. So we actually went to the Capitol several years ago to ask our legislators to vote no in opposition to the new TISA bill, because the TISA bill was the gateway to all of this in Tennessee, in my opinion, because it changed the funding formula for the state of Tennessee. And so we started educating them. They didn't listen. They passed it. And I warned them, this is the Trojan horse, and we're going to be seeing this school choice legislation come in. See, with TISA, there's less accountability. So they needed to replace the current funding formula we had with one that would allow less oversight and less accountability to the taxpayer, which they did. So we have the TISA funding formula now, and that thing is so convoluted. Even a lot of the people that are tasked with executing it don't even understand it. And so, again, that's in my seminar information as well. But what we found was we've watched this across the nation, and my ministry's nationwide, so I don't just focus on Tennessee. I'm connected with people all over the United States who are fighting the exact same things that we're fighting here in Tennessee. Their fight may be more advanced, or they might be fighting more pervasive overreach because they've gotten farther down the road than Tennessee. But I've been able to have the unique experience to talk to other people that are doing exactly what I do in other states. And then we can create a bigger picture, for our followers, so that we can hopefully sound the alarm so that they will see this and understand. And it's funny that you should bring up Florida, because that's also in my seminar, because I actually have screenshots of the application that they have to fill out in order to utilize these funds in Florida. And they have to be public school equivalent. And there are all kinds of strings that are attached to this particular scam. I'm just going to call it what it is, scam. Okay. And so we were expecting all this. I had a private school contact me in Florida, and they were funding in Florida. And then they were then attached to all the strings that came with that funding, and they wanted out from underneath the strings. Guess what? The only way out from underneath those strings would be to close down and to start up a school somewhere else that didn't accept the funding, because they were already locked into those strings. And so we were expecting, this, I just wrote about this. This last legislative session in Tennessee was a circus. I mean, it was an absolute circus. And we were there every time the voucher bill was in committee, and even on the days that it was supposed to be in committee, and we drove up there and they decided not to hear it in committee that day. So we were there with our kids. Our kids had school books, laying out in the hallways of Cordell Hall, which is where the House and the Senate actually have their committee meetings. And they would be sitting in the seats of the committee meetings doing their handwriting or their math or we are true homeschoolers there at the I say the Capitol. It wasn't in the Capitol building. So if you're coming to Tennessee to be there in committee, the building is Cordell Hall. So that's where we were. When it goes to the floor, you're actually at the Capitol building for the House and Senate floor sessions. But what we saw, and again, I've written about this and I've done some radio shows on this too, the experiences that we had as we moved through this, and brought some of the moms on to talk about, their perspective, so that people weren't just hearing my opinion on it, but those who were actually there. So, I've heard all the same things. Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. You get this money. What they're not telling you is this is incrementalism. And this is exactly how they hope to trap parents, is by dangling the money carrot in their faces. And then they take it and they get a little bit of taste of that, and they want more and more and more. And it allows them to come in and consistently tighten the screws with more and more and more government overreach, until eventually all forms of education are government controlled. There is no choice when all forms of education are controlled by the government. And if you take government funds, you are going to have to do what they tell you. There's no such thing as free money. It's no longer your money when it goes into the government coffers and it comes back to you. That boomerang money always comes with strings. And so parents have been misled, and they have been lied to, and told that, it's going to be great. It's going to help you so much. But what they're doing is they're slowly eroding freedoms. And this is happening, all across the states, and not to mention the devastation fiscally to the states, because they can't afford it. They can't keep up with it. And economically, it's a nightmare for the states that are adopting this. So, Florida's new with the universal school choice. It's not that old there, and we will see all of this. Like I said, I requested the application, got it, looked at it, had all the red flags and signs in it that I expected to see in Tennessee when they brought the voucher legislation to the table. That voucher legislation in Tennessee, listen to the irony in this, was called the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And so that irony wasn't lost on us. It was amended several times. The Senate version was different from the House version. The House version was an omnibus bill. There was a huge media circus around a, quote, leaked homeschool meeting with one of the representatives. And this meeting was credited with essentially killing the bill, because the representative was talking about how they needed to, destroy the whole system, burn the system to the ground, and start over. Well, that meeting was with my group. It was with me. It was with Free Your Children. And I did not leak that. However, that meeting wasn't private. So anyone that requested to listen to what we discussed that was involved with Free Your Children was provided that. And I said on the radio show that I did recently about this, that meeting was, I think the recording was an hour and 33 minutes long. I wouldn't have chosen those clips to be made public. There were other things very concerning that were said in that meeting that we were unhappy about. And those would have been the clips that I would have chosen had I been the one that had made it public. I'm not sorry that it was made public, because I said from the beginning, my goal is to kill the bill. That was our goal. And we were told from the beginning, there's too much money behind this, which there was. There are billion-dollar corporations that are lobbying, that are pushing these initiatives, and we were told we couldn't make a difference, to give up, go home. They would change committee meeting dates, after we had driven to Nashville. And let me stop there and say, going to Nashville, we live over an hour away from Nashville, and some of these committee meetings would be at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. So you're talking about commuting into downtown traffic. So we would have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then pack lunches, because sometimes we would be there upwards of 8-10 hours a day, depending on if they delayed committees or they changed times. So it was a feat to get there in and of itself, drag our kids with us, but we did it. And we packed those meetings, and they were not expecting that. At the end, you could tell they were like, are these people ever going to go away? Like, they just keep coming back, and they're sitting there and they're holding their orange signs and they're asking us questions. And I will tell people, when you are fighting a piece of legislation, if you're in support, even if you're in support of it, you need to show up. Emails are great. Phone calls are great. But what's more important is that you show up. And that, I feel like, makes a huge impact on your legislators. And so I would just encourage parents to do the hard work and actually show up, because there is power in numbers, and true grassroots organizations do work.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so hard for us. I really wanted to get up and go, and I have a 15-year-old, and I believe he would be, I don't know, he's very into politics.
Yeah.
And so I would love to take him. I know they have a teen pact here in Tennessee, and I've kind of looked at maybe getting him into something like that. But we're in East
we did
Tennessee.
have to resort to getting a hotel one night, and they canceled the next morning on us, which was just so frustrating. But I will tell you, last legislative session, we were fighting against at-risk boarding charters, and that was HB 1214. And I had mobilized around 168 families to come to the Capitol in opposition to that bill. We had families from East Tennessee, and they made the drive. God bless them, all those hours. And they were there at the Capitol. And of course, they got there, and then they decided that it wasn't going to be heard in that particular committee. And they do that. And I tell people, and it was because they were not expecting this huge, major, influx of parents. But that particular piece of legislation, what it did was it was going to change the education code, so it said, and it was going to allow another homeschooling option. But if you signed up for that option, your child would then be considered a public school parent. But embedded, and that is a thing in other states, by the way, which is just insane to me. But embedded in that bill was this at-risk boarding charter school mess. And what it was going to do was identify at-risk children that could then earn a bed in these residential boarding charter facilities. And so because they had lumped homeschooling in that bill, that one caught our attention really quickly. And we saw that through the nefarious roots. Well, that bill was shelved. And I warned everyone, it's not going away. It's going to come back, but we don't know where. It came back this legislative session, and it passed. So it passed through. And and so that was another piece of legislation that we were there fighting against. And every single parent should be in the state of Tennessee should be concerned with this. specifically if you have children in public school, because they have easy access to your kids. They're going to be able to very easily identify them as at risk, and then potentially earn them a bed in these at-risk boarding charters. And I've done shows on this too. I mean, this is so nefarious. Go into deep detail about this in my seminars, and why we should be concerned. There's a whole nother initiative behind all of this that we won't even have time to get on, into on your show today, but that did pass through. We said that there was a trifecta this year. I said there's 3 bills. I would tell all the legislators this. There are 3 bills in our legislature moving through right now, and they're working in tandem with one another. One was the voucher bill, one was the at-risk boarding charters, and the other was the fake parental rights bill. And 2 out of 3 passed. So the at-risk boarding charters passed, the fake parental rights bill passed, and we beat back the school choice, the voucher bill. So what people need to understand about this is the fake parental rights bill actually subverts parental rights to the government or any entity that the government decides can make decisions for your children. Again, have a whole lot more information on that too. Check out my website, freeyourchildren.com. Under the FYC toolkit, I have it broken down into subcategories. There are radio shows there. There are articles that I have written there that will go into more detail regarding exactly, what's happening in Tennessee and across the nation. So where was I? So the fake parental rights bill passed. The at-risk boarding charter school bill passed. So if your parental rights have been subverted to the government, and if those entities can identify at-risk children, where can they place them? They can place them in the at-risk boarding charters. Okay. So then from that, what people needed to understand is these at-risk boarding charters will be registered as Category 1 schools in the state of Tennessee when they're up and operational. Under the school voucher bill, Category 1 schools did not have to go through a 3-year waiting period to be able to utilize the voucher funding. They could utilize that funding right out of the gate. And if a child has been adjudicated and sent to an at-risk boarding charter facility, not only are they getting tons of money, sometimes upwards of $500 a day, they are also getting more money from TISA because they have been identified as at risk. And if they're a foster child, even more money from the TISA funding formula. So there's lots of different components to this. And then we have homeschool children whose parents have them still kind of connected to the public school system. Maybe they're getting therapies where they take their children into the school for therapies, or they may be playing sports for the public school system. What they need to understand is they're now training all coaches, religious leaders, people that are doing the after school clubs. Your friend down in Florida was talking about jujitsu and all these other, let me say this. If you are utilizing voucher funding, those providers have to be on a state-approved list, okay? And so what they're doing in these states is they're training all of these individuals to be able to identify at-risk children. So, it just gets more and more thick as we go through this. And when I'm doing a seminar, they're long. They're about 2.5 hours. And I tell people, but listen, I hear people say, that's too long. It doesn't hold my attention. Really, I can guarantee you're scrolling on your phone longer than that a day. And I say to parents, to representatives, are children important enough? Are the children of our nation important enough? You need to know this information. You need to understand this. And then you need to do something about it. You need to take action. You need to stop voting for promoting initiatives that are consistently destroying parental rights and stealing the souls of our children in the United States across the nation. And this is happening everywhere. It's just so pervasive. And sometimes it feels like I was interviewing a guest the other day who has been doing this for a long time. And she said, it feels like you're just yelling into a hurricane. You're just screaming, hello, are you people listening? And so that's what, and I know that the time is short.
Yeah.
I would say this global agenda of education, we have probably already reached like the 75% mark of this being a done deal. And we have a very short window because now, organizations like Americans for Prosperity, who have all this money, American Federation for Children, who have all this money, they are promoting all of these school choice initiatives and legislation across the United States. So as each state gets swallowed up into adopting these initiatives, we are giving them more and more control. So I know that this summer we are really in a race to educate here in Tennessee specifically, but across the nation. I don't just do the seminars here. I'll go anywhere, anyone wants to be educated, on what's going on. But I know here in Tennessee, if we don't launch mass education prior to this next legislative session, it is going to be disastrous for families and children in Tennessee. It is very scary. I've been accused of being a fear monger, and I said, no, what's scary is that people aren't educated, and you are trying to censor the information and prevent parents from being educated. I already in Tennessee, this is on the Tennessee.gov website. You can look it up. I have interviewed parents that have come to me anonymously and told me their stories. I've talked about this on multiple radio shows. If your child is in public school in the state of Tennessee, they can interrogate your child without you present. If they do that, and then they decide that DCS needs to be called, then your child then enters that DCS pipeline. And this has already happened. It is happening. Parents will go to school, and this is on an allegation. So if your child is at school and little Jimmy says that your child said something that made them fear for their safety, they can go tell an adult at that school. They can then interrogate your child without you present. Then they can make psychologists, psychiatrists. So then they can then contact DCS. They can come and pick up your child, enter them into the DCS pipeline. And I've had parents call me and say, this happened to my child. I came to the school to pick them up. They had already been removed. I had no way of getting in touch with them or knowing where they were for 72 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Because they can hold them for 72 hours. And so then it throws them into the DCS pipeline where they can potentially get diagnosed with something or be, labeled as or charged as a juvenile delinquent, which then, throws them into the at-risk category. And then you have the court system and DCS involved, in your home. And the stories that these families are having to deal with are just horrifying. And when parents come to me and say, what can I do? And I'm not going to make excuses for this. I tell parents, first and foremost, get them out of the public school system. I do realize that there are some instances, maybe in divorce cases, where a judge has said you're not allowed to homeschool your child. And legally, they cannot do that. I understand that. I would still implore them to try to find a better solution if they can come to an agreement, a private school. But if you are using the excuses, because that's what we are, if it's important enough to you, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse. If you are a single parent, you can still homeschool. How do I know this? Because I've interviewed hundreds of them and I have their stories compiled, and they homeschool successfully and have been doing it for a long time. If you are dual working parents, you can homeschool, and there are tons of those, and they do it successfully. You just have to learn to think out of the box. It just comes down to parents are going to have to make choices, hard choices, and sacrifices. And those are words that parents don't like to hear. Sacrifice, giving things up, hard work, dedication. It's all those things. But, our children are given to us, not the government. And we can't complain about what's going on in the school system if we're continuing to send them into the same system that is wreaking havoc, on parental rights and freedoms. And then we have to get engaged. I hear people say, I don't like politics. I'm not going to get involved in politics. And my retort to that has always been, you may not want to be involved in politics, but politics is involved in you.
For sure.
Because they are going to be passing laws and, creating legislation that is going to affect your family. And at some point, when is it enough?
Right.
When are enough people going to come together and say, we've had enough of this? So Free Your Children, over the summer, originally the whole meeting that I had said that was leaked with the representative, and that meeting was credited with essentially killing the voucher legislation this session. That and among the fact that we were going, and speaking out so much, and there were other organizations that were opposed to this too, not for the same reasons that we were, but there was pushback from other communities against school choice, but obviously not for the reasons why we were. But I will say this: people need to get engaged, and you need to show up. So this summer, we're going to be planning on drafting legislation to try to get homeschoolers out from under that private school umbrella, because we had originally asked for a constitutional amendment, and we would still like to see that. That's what I was saying about the meeting. That was the purpose of that meeting. We were going in to talk about a constitutional amendment, but that takes around 6 years to accomplish, and we need immediate protections. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, we are going to be working on drafting legislation that will take us out from underneath that private school category, because I firmly believe that parents do not need to ask permission from the state to homeschool their children. It's legal in all 50 states. We should not have to be registering with any agency. We are their parents. We don't have to ask permission to do that. And, that is, in my opinion, it's not constitutional to be required to do that in the state of Tennessee, to have the least oversight. So the reason why parents choose the Category 4 church-related schools umbrella option is that is the category that gives the parents the most freedom and the least oversight from the government. We should not have to register under that option in the state of Tennessee. We should have the freedom like other states and just be able to say, we're going to homeschool, and that should be enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're operating in the United States from a position of, you're guilty of something until you're proven innocent, instead of the opposite. And this is what I'm seeing, across the nation with overreaching legislation. Missouri, and I've been in close contact with them. They've been fighting ridiculous overreach in Missouri this legislative session, regarding the homeschool community. So, Alabama has just passed universal school choice. And in the past, they have had horrible legislation, introduced that was just scary for the homeschool community. So it's everywhere, and it's just going to continue to grow and spread, especially if the mass public still remains asleep at the wheel, so to speak.
Right. I don't think people really know what's going on. And
they do not.
I feel called to really help you get this word out.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I feel like there's been a huge shift in America in the last, since 2020.
Yes.
Most people have gone to, they want the government out of their school. They kind of saw how the government ran that and how they tried to dictate things. And they're like, I want the government out of my life. I don't want the government involved in my food, in my schooling, in my children, in my home,
medical,
medical,
yes. Everything.
Yes.
And so I feel like we just need to get this word out so those people who are turning into that really hear what's happening.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of those people, they believe that, but then they think that they still believe that school choice is the answer, because they don't understand how they're using that right there to be able to gain control of those of us. Homeschooling and private school, really homeschooling, is still the last frontier of freedom. We are the last frontier of freedom. That's the reason why they want to dangle the carrot into the homeschool community, because we said, we were meeting with legislators, and even AFP had tried to have a discussion with me about what they could do to make the homeschool community happy. And I said, kill the bill. And they didn't like that response. But I said, are you willing to take Category 4 schools out of this legislation? Well, of course, the answer to that was no. They weren't willing to take it out, because that's who they wanted to capture, in their net. And that is where the majority of homeschool families have landed, is in that category. So then they were like, well, we're willing to take homeschooling out of it. Well, that's not good enough, because if you know how legislation works, wording is easily amended. So at the stroke of a pen, and when they're allowed to, promulgate rules, which is a whole nother thing we haven't even talked about yet in the state of Tennessee, they can change that. And then we're lumped right back into all of that. So it's a slippery slope. You don't ever want to be put into the net and then try to get out. You want to protect your freedoms on the front end. And one thing that we realized, and I started sounding the alarm on this over the summer, when I realized that the State Board of Education had the authority to promulgate rules for non-public schools, and homeschools and private schools are considered non-public schools. And so they made changes over the summer, and they're making more changes constantly. And it's really easy for them to change things, and no one knows what's going on because no one's been watching it until now, because now we're watching it very closely, that this is a problem. And in states where the State Board of Education has the authority to promulgate rules, it consistently leads to an erosion of freedoms. And so we have that issue going on right now in the state of Tennessee. When I started warning about that, I had lots of entities that claim that they protect homeschoolers, saying she's just spreading fear and she's just doing X, Y, and Z. It doesn't affect us. Yes, it does. Every single parent should be highly concerned, because one thing that we heard over and over when we were sitting in these committees was this, when they were asking about how the voucher program was going to be implemented, how it was going to be administrated. This is what we were told. It will be passed first, and then the State Board of Education will promulgate the rules regarding how it will be administered and ran.
I've heard that on so much legislation. And
yes.
It's like, no, because it never works out good.
Exactly. So it's a Nancy Pelosi bill. Pass it, and then we'll tell you what's in it and how it's going to work, after it's passed. I don't think so.
Yeah.
That doesn't work with us. I don't think so. One thing about homeschool parents is most of us are politically engaged. A high population of us are educated in terms of, we're going to dig in and do our own research, and we're going to read the bill. It was amazing to me. Our legislators, most of them hadn't read the bill. A lot of them, I'll take that back. A lot of them, well, I will tell you this, when they were first called, because I testified, I don't know if you know this or not, but I testified in opposition to this bill in both the House and the Senate when it was in committee. And when I testified in front of the House, the discussion that was going on, and you can go back and watch it, my testimony is actually on the Free Your Children Rumble channel. It's linked over on my freeyourchildren.com website, so you can go and hear what I had to say when I gave my testimony. But those legislators were complaining and saying, we were given this bill less than 24 hours before you're asking us to vote on it, and we haven't had time to read it. And that happens all the time. So the majority of those legislators, when it went through the committee where I testified, they had not had time to read that bill.
That's just
and there
ridiculous.
was a reason. There's a reason why they're trying to ram it, through, so quickly. And so that was interesting to watch. And also the at-risk boarding charter school legislation. So that legislation was embedded in a caption bill, a 275-page caption bill. So if you went and read the caption, it said, reporting of allergies, student allergies to the Board of Education. It said nothing about an at-risk boarding charter. So a friend of mine who I have interviewed has been on my show numerous times, and we've worked together on trying to shed light on what's going on in Tennessee on certain pieces of legislation, happened to be at the Capitol, and she went into a committee that was happening at that time just because she was trying to kill some time before she had to go be somewhere else. And that's where she heard the at-risk boarding charter school legislation come up again, embedded in that 275-page bill. And it was just sailing through committee after committee after committee. And we tried to shed light on that one, but we had spent so much time trying to warn people about the voucher bill that it kind of went under the radar. I mean, we kicked up a stink, but not nearly enough. And they were able to push it through. So now all they're waiting on is for school choice to pass in the state of Tennessee so that they can start leveraging the funding that's attached to that for these at-risk boarding charters.
Where can I find out more? What is the name of this at-risk charters bill again? It's the HB.
I'll have to look that one up. I have it on my website. So I think it's HB 2936, I believe. I have a whole list of them. If you go to my website, you can find some of them. And then over on my Facebook page, I said I'm dreaming of legislative numbers now because we were tracking the voucher bill. We were tracking the fake parental rights bill, and that bill might have been the parental rights bill. It might have been HB 2922, but I can get you those so that you can go back and you can post those. But, you know, I was constantly sharing calls to action, updating, you know, this is where the bill is. These are the representatives you need to contact, you know, send them an email. This is when it's coming to committee. And we'll be doing that every legislative session. And so we will also be making trips to the State Board of Education when they have their monthly meetings to see what's on their agenda and what they plan to promulgate for whatever month that we're in at the time. Because, you know, it's a pervasive problem. We realized that we were going to have to ramp up, and that we were going to have to bring way more volunteers on board, and that we were going to have to get even more mobilized and more activated and more engaged this summer, because there's so much, and I'm one person. So if I don't have people that are helping me, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I have been heavily censored. I'm on a different radio station now, but the previous radio station that I was on, 302 of my posts about my radio shows and my guests were removed from social media. But I'm also getting censorship from conservative groups that do not want my message out there, because there seems to be a lot of conflicts of interest when you start following the money regarding some of who these groups are closely affiliated with or may have partnered with. And they don't really like the fact that Tiffany Boyd from Free Your Children is shining a light on some things that probably should concern people. It concerns me. And I encourage other people to start asking questions about why X, Y, and Z organization that claims to be fighting for freedom happens to be linked up with X, Y, and Z who promote school choice or fake parental rights bills, or, you know, freedom snatching, or stealing your kids and placing them in institutions. And these are the conversations that need to be had, because, you know, where do you get your truth? If the people that are supposed to be on your side are then censoring you, then we have a problem.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have a really big problem, because even homeschool groups, certain homeschool groups would not allow me to post calls to action during this legislative session in their groups. They would delete my post. They didn't want the information out there. Some of them had disseminated incorrect information. Why? I don't know. But it was very concerning to see that happen. There's a big group, and I'm one of the admins in that group as well, and it's called Homeschool Freedom Fighters, and it's actually a private group. People can join that too. I share things there. But most importantly, if people aren't following Free Your Children, and if you go to the website, you can even send us your email so that we can contact you in case this censorship continues. My largest platform currently is on Facebook. Obviously, we know that has been and can be censored at any time. So we're trying to drive people to our other platforms, you know, in the event that we are removed from that one, or our content starts getting removed from that one. So I'm on Rumble. All of these platforms are just now starting to build, but Rumble, X, which is, you know, formerly Twitter, Telegram, Signal, YouTube, but YouTube is heavily censored as well. I have a Spotify for my old radio shows where I uploaded them. Currently, people can listen to my radio show on WKOM 101.7 FM, and then it goes to Podcast Portal there. And so they're on all the podcast portal platforms, and I'm going to be converting those to my Spotify as well. So we're just trying to utilize as many platforms as possible to try to get this information out there to as many people as possible. I've been very blessed that people have told other people, you need to interview her, you need to have her on your show. So I've had, you know, wonderful opportunities to be on shows like yours, and, you know, be interviewed by other individuals who have their own, you know, network and circle of influence to try to get folks, again, as educated as possible in order to be able to protect their freedoms, because you're right, people do not know.
Well, we'll make sure we get all the links to everything and put those in the comments below. And
sure, thank you.
My question, what do we do? How do we start your page in every state? How do other people in different states find out who's on their side and who's fighting for them?
I would highly, you know, encourage them to come to the website, put in their email. We're getting ready to launch a Substack too. And that's one thing that Free Your Children is working on to do, is to network, everyone across the United States into one group. So we are a large group of unified entities that are fighting for freedom together. Because what's happening is homeschool communities and private schools, they can be kind of on an island, even in Tennessee. I mean, we have tons of different homeschool groups, but they don't always interlock together or work together or, network together like they should. And that's been the most frustrating to me, is if the group won't let me post the information in there, how do I get the information to those families that need to know this? Right. So I would just encourage everyone to stay connected with Free Your Children. If you live in another state, I can give you people who are doing the same thing that I do in that state that I speak with on a regular basis. I can get them connected to those people and those organizations so that, we can all work together and be able to keep each other. Because this is what I tell people all the time. Tennessee is not on an island. What you are seeing happening in others, and even if you are on an island like Hawaii, what happens everywhere else is going to affect you. So you can watch legislation and initiatives that are happening in other states. That used to be the joke when I was a teacher. Whatever was happening in California, it's going to move to Tennessee eventually. And it's still that way. Whatever you see happening in other states, it's going to come to Tennessee. And, I hear this all the time. Well, Tennessee is conservative. Really? Well, it was your conservative representatives and senators that were promoting a lot of these pieces of legislation. It was the fake parental rights bill that was Republican sponsored. The at-risk boarding charter schools, Republican sponsored, and it had bipartisan support. Your school choice legislation, Republican sponsored. So first off, I don't even think that people know what conservative really means anymore. They don't know what a conservative is. Most of the people, when I do my seminars, I have an excerpt that I share. And so I read the excerpt, and we have all these people sitting in the audience, and they're shaking their head. Yes, they agree with this. And then I say, you're doing every one of these things that you say that we shouldn't be doing. And they have no idea what I'm even reading from. And it has to do with the platform. So, people, they don't know. They've been sold one thing that this school choice scam, they've been really good at. Number one, they have money. So they can inundate as many platforms as possible with the same talking points over and over and over. And in America, if people hear things enough, it's like a form of brainwashing. They just, that sounds like a really good idea. This is what we need to know. So they have the ability to purchase multiple platforms where they can go in and share the same thing over and over and over. So we have to make sure that our voices are louder on as many platforms as possible, because it's just propaganda and it's marketing, and they've done a great job, because they'll say, well, if you're against school choice, you don't really care about the poor little children. And then my retort is, well, the poor little children are the very ones that are going to be your worker bees, and you're going to be slamming into these at-risk boarding charter school facilities. So if you really want to talk about what's happening to the poor little children, let's have a discussion. School choice is not about the poor children that are stuck in schools, because guess what? Those kids are still going to be stuck in schools, because the voucher monies does not cover the complete tuition of a private school, ever. Okay. So is a poor family that may be on government assistance, are they going to be able to come up with a $3,000 shortfall to send them to the private school of their choice? No, they're not. And then what happens is private schools, most of them, I would venture to guess, are going to start accepting this money. And then they're going to increase the tuition to be able to control who is actually coming to their schools. So when I hear people say to me, it creates competition. Really? So is there really competition when the government controls it all?
Right. No.
Isn't that real? That's called a monopoly. That's called a monopoly. That's called socialism. This is nothing more than, socialism. And then, of course, the goal was to expand communism. This is educational welfare. It's an entitlement program. The list goes on. And we haven't even gotten into the discussion of, in Tennessee and other states where they have launch these universal school choice programs, what happens is it creates a whole nother category of your government, because it creates cottage industries in terms of, I talked about vendors. Okay. So in Tennessee, they wanted these particular pieces of, this particular legislation to be able to provide parents with opportunity to utilize this money to spend on uniforms, transportation, therapy. That should be a big one. Listen, if you are utilizing a therapist that's on the state board a website, they're going to be propagating all the things that I'm warning about. If you lost your minds, parents, wake up. So you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z and go through some type of a selection process to be placed on that vendor list. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, this program is going to require our state government to create a whole nother section of government to manage all of this. And then the money, they're not going to walk up to your door and say, oh, you want a voucher? Here's the $7,000. You just go spend it however you want to. That's not how it works. You get a digital wallet, and that digital wallet data mines those families who choose to participate. And in other states, there have been Class Wallet, for example, is one of them. And what they were mining from that parents was absolutely jaw-dropping. And these parents are just signing up for it willy-nilly because they think that they see free money, but they don't even realize what types of information is being harvested, not just on their child, but on their families as well. So it goes, so deep. And then, again, our taxpayers' dollars are then going to be funding all of these businesses that have sprung up. So it just gets, deeper and deeper. So your taxpayers' dollars are going to go be funding this uniform company and this transportation company and this third-party entity that's providing therapy services. And, it just goes on and on and on. And people have not stopped to think of the repercussions that are involved, in this. And it's scary, but this was the intention.
Yeah, right.
I feel like you give a mile or you give an inch, they take a mile.
Exactly. That's what it is. And it's just incrementalism. Once they get their foot in the door, it's just more and more and more. And, we see that. I warned over on Free Your Children in Tennessee, the State Board of Education promulgated the rules. And one of the rule promulgations is they have the ability to promulgate rules under health and safety, including fire inspections. Well, that then has been used in other states to get into the homes of homeschooling parents.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But in Missouri, there's been legislation going around that if you take funding, to homeschool your children, you are considered a public school in the public school category in Missouri. I hope I'm getting that part of this correctly, but either way, it gives the Board of Education the ability to say, since you are operating now as a public school or a private school, whatever, we can then come into your homes. And what are you not allowed to have in a school?
Gun.
A firearm. Yeah. So then you can't have that in your home because you're operating as a school. And that was part of the legislation that they have been fighting. So it's just this incremental overreach, coming into homes. And again, because Free Your Children is connected to, nationwide to other people, they will send me messages and be like, hey, you help us spread word about this bill. This is what we have going on here. They've come on my shows to talk about this. We've already highlighted this, in several of the Free Your Children radio shows. This is what they're doing in Michigan. I had Israel Wayne on my radio show not long ago to talk about this overreach of them wanting to create a registry in Michigan for homeschool students. And we already have that in Tennessee, but people here aren't even, when you register, I don't know if parents know this or not, even as an umbrella school, when you register your homeschool child as an umbrella school, they then report that information to the district in which your child would be required to attend. Name, age, all of that. So we already have registries in Tennessee of all of our children. And that's not constitutional, in my opinion. They're our children. And if we choose to homeschool our children and educate our children, we should not be required to register with anyone. And it goes back to conversations we had. We went to the Capitol prior to really getting into the throes of the bills moving through the legislative session. And we were sitting there with our Republican lawmakers, and one in particular still jumps out to me to this day. And he's talking to us about the Tennessee Constitution, which we'd read, by the way. And he was paraphrasing. And one of the moms said, "That's not what it says." "Yes, that's what it says." "That's not what it says. Read us exactly where it says that." So he looks it up and he reads it, and she says, "That's not what it says. It says children in Tennessee are entitled to a free public education. It doesn't say anything about a private education." So then I said, "I'd like to redirect this, if I may, and ask a question." And I looked at him and I said, "Do you believe that parents or the state of Tennessee has more rights in terms of a child's education?" And he looked at me and he said, "It's equal." And this was a conservative representative, okay? And I said, and that's why we have a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's not equal. The state has no right to my child at all, period. And he said, "Well, if you don't register with someone, how are we going to know if you're truant or not?" And I said, maybe because they woke up alive.
Yeah.
They're our children. We're homeschooling them. We don't have to answer to you in terms of, how our homeschools operate. So,
right.
Again, I feel really bad. We have a lot of people who have come on board with Free Your Children who are not originally from Tennessee. They came from other states with horrible oversight and overreach and erosion of freedom. And they moved here because they had been sold the lie that Tennessee was the place to be. And then they got here and they found me and they were freaking out. "Oh my goodness." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. You were lied to. This is what's really going on." And they have become really actively involved in supporting the Free Your Children ministry. That's another thing. We've laughed about this. When I said we are the true epitome of grassroots, like, we are self-funded. We don't have AFP sending us millions of dollars. We averaged, it was costing us around $65 to $70 a day to travel to the Capitol out of our pockets. The radio show that I have, it's pay to play, which means I pay $200 for every episode that goes on the radio. The reason why we chose to felt the need to do that was because we wanted on the air prior to the legislative session, because it has a high population of local voters. And we wanted to try to get that information out to, those that could influence lawmakers in Tennessee as quickly as possible, while we were dealing with this. So, tons of cost associated with what we do, but yet we just survive on donations from people who feel like the work that we're doing is important and that they want to see us be able, to continue doing what we're doing. And so I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that people have realized that and I will say this, all the days that we were at the Capitol, it didn't appear to me that there were any other entities there fighting for our freedoms.
Wow.
There were none that come up that, accosted us and said, "I'm with X, Y, and Z. We're here to support you and doing the same thing." We didn't see any of that. What we saw on a regular basis at the Capitol was Free Your Children filling those committee meetings. So, and that's what it takes. I had representatives tell me that, first off, there's some organizations that may send you like an email and you click to sign a link, like a digital. He said, "We don't even read those. We delete all that. We don't read any of those emails. They just go into the trash heap." It takes doing the hard work as far as reaching out personally. And unfortunately, it requires showing up or picking up the phone and calling, or even, I will say this, if you are not local to Nashville and it's not physically possible for you to drive 5 hours to come, because that's not, realistic. If you live 7 hours away, 6 hours away, you can't drive every single week to every single committee meeting. It's expensive, as I well know. But you can support the people who are doing that. You can support the organizations that are through financial contributions, through sharing their content, helping them get the word out, helping them mobilize. But you can also do this. You can also talk to your senators and your representatives in your area. And you can also try to get them to talk to those of us who are, on the front lines and help us in that aspect too, because it's going to take a movement, and it can't just be a few people. It's going to take tons of families, standing up and linking arms and, getting down in the trenches together and doing the hard work, because they know they have the money.
Right.
I mean, they told us that. AFP told us in the hallway, you can get a lot done with money and door knockers.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, they told me that. I mean, their lobbyists looked me in the face and told me that. And they shared that information with us. And so we're proud of the fact that we did beat it back this legislative session, but we know it's coming back. We already know that. And we also know that this is an election year, so campaigns are going to be run on school choice. So I would highly recommend that if you know of people that are running in your area for office, start having hard conversations with them. Ask them if they're for school choice. If they say they are, attempt to educate them or send them to me, or get seminars hosted in your area so we could bring, these individuals in and try to educate as many people as possible. But that's one thing that we started doing, is already interviewing people that are running. If you have legislators that are in office, representatives, senators, and you don't know where they stand, start reaching. You can look at their voting record for one.
Right.
see what skills they carried, and start having difficult conversations with them as well, to tell them, if you're opposed, why, and what they need to understand, and remind them that you vote.
Yep.
And remind them that you have a circle of influence, because one thing that we saw that really made us sick, I'm just going to be honest, when we were at the Capitol and in committees, is that some of these legislators feel like they do not have to answer to their constituents. They feel like they're by their actions. We felt like from their actions and the way some of them, interacted with us personally, that they're in charge, we're in the way, and they're going to do what they want to do. So, I made it clear when I wrote an article. I said, our Tennessee legislature has been bought and sold by lobbyists.
They've got to clear them out every couple of years. You need whole new people in, or they're already bought and paid for.
Right. Yes. The only one place I have seen them be able to accomplish amazing things, and I highlighted them on my radio show, and it's Camden County, Missouri. And they have been able to just create a huge movement there. And they started by educating. They started by educating about Common Core, and how Common Core was the precursor to school choice, and how it's still all related, and what they're doing with all of this. And then they were able to vote all these people out and put people in who knew, who were educated and were committed to changing the trajectory, for their county. And that's what it's going to take here, starting at the local level and moving all the way up. The frustrating thing for us is we're getting individuals that are running, but they're invested in the exact same initiatives that the ones that we're trying to vote out are. And oftentimes they don't want to hear the truth. They just don't want to hear the truth. That goes back to money, power, influence. Oftentimes politicians, whoever brought them, they have to dance with whoever brought them. So whoever's making those large campaign donations and who, they are attached to, oftentimes drive the narrative in a campaign. So we need real statesmen instead of politicians, not just in Tennessee, but across the United States. And those would likely be one and done. Because you go in and you get things done, and then you move on and the next one steps in. But that's definitely what it's going to take, and another thing that I want to remind, we heard this in some Senate hearings that we were in when questions were being asked, because the Democrat representatives were very open about if school choice legislation passes, they want just as much, if not more, really more, accountability on homeschoolers in private schools that accept voucher funding. So here's what happens. If your state is conservative, it's not always going to be conservative. Politics goes in cycles. So what's going to happen when all this garbage legislation has been passed through, and then conservatives, and I use that term lightly, are no longer in control, and you get in a group of individuals that are making laws or promulgating rules for your state that believe that government should be the big brother.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They have a heyday. And I asked our senator, I said, he came to one of my seminars, and when it was over with, he proceeded to tell me why, as a homeschooler, I needed to take this money. And I looked at him and I said, that's not your job. Your job is not to tell me what I need to do. Your job is to listen to what I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm telling you that it is not the government's job to be a surrogate parent. And I do not want government money with government strings. And he's a very kind person, and he's very open to what you have to say. Not that he listens necessarily or agrees with it, but he does have a polite manner in which he responds. And I said to him, I said, let me ask you something. I said, so what's going to happen if these pieces of legislation go through when we are no longer a Republican stronghold? And the answer was, well, we'll just have to pray good people get in charge, are in control. And I looked at him and I said, so essentially what you're asking me to do is be okay with gambling away my freedoms. That's what you're asking me. And I'm not okay with that. So I choose not to do it in the first place and not to let the Trojan horse into the room. And, parents, if you are homeschooling or sending your children to private school and you think that money is the answer to your problems, it's only the beginning of your problems.
Right. Yeah.
So I would encourage you, if you think homeschooling is expensive, it's not. You don't have to buy big, expensive curriculums, box curriculums. You can homeschool with nothing more than the internet and a library card, or build your own personal library. People donate curriculums to you. You don't have to have all that. That's just a lie. And it's one that people want you to believe. If you are a family that depends on two incomes and you think, well, I can't quit work to stay home and homeschool my children, you don't have to. There are dual working homeschool families that homeschool all the time, and they make it happen. And, they tweak it so that it fits, their family and how it needs to look for their family. But what I would encourage communities to do is, if you have a large population of working homeschool families, get together and create your own co-ops and share the responsibilities with people that you trust and love, and have the exact same thoughts and beliefs and attitudes and behaviors that you feel are important in your home. And again, I've been screaming this at the top of my lungs for years. Where is the church? I'm a ministry. You know how many pastors I have that are willing to allow me to come in and host a seminar at their church and talk about what's really going on in public and government schools and what these initiatives are leading to? Zero. None are brave enough to have the conversation, because the school system is the number one employer in most areas, and they don't want to offend those individuals in their congregations. They're really doing it a service, because we're losing our youth at an alarming rate, upwards of 80%. And if we lose all of our children, there's no one to go forth and create disciples. So churches, you are not fulfilling your biblical responsibilities. Where are the men? The men need to step up. We have to have people realizing that this is a need, and stop being afraid. If you're a 501c3 and that's the reason why you're staying quiet about this, then maybe you don't need to be a 501c3. The government is controlling your narrative. You're running a business, not a church. And as you will notice, Free Your Children is an LLC. It's not a 501c3. You know why? Because I don't want the government in my business, and I don't want the shackles and the chains that come along with that. So, time to have hard conversations across the board. I've told everyone that's affiliated with Free Your Children, go have discussions with your pastor. If he isn't willing to hear this information and get educated himself first and educate church leadership, there's a huge, huge problem.
I think we both go to the same church. I think we have a pastor that would be on board. But...
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Years ago, I wrote an article. It's been several years now, titled The Elephant in the Room. The title of the article was The Elephant in the Room. And then I did a series of radio shows on this topic. Okay. So I had people all over the United States reach out to me and say, would you please contact my pastor? Send him a link to that article. Here's his name. Here's the address to my church. I'm thinking, boy, these people are trusting that I'm not a psycho. Because I had all their church's personal information, email information. They asked to remain anonymous. They said, reach out to my pastor, explain to him who you are, share this content, and let me know if he gets back to you. I sent out hundreds of emails across the United States. Guess how many responses I received? 0. 0.
That's frustrating.
Very frustrating, because churches are going to have to stand in the gap. They are going to have to, and some are already providing resources for families that want to homeschool, but that's not enough. They have to get every single congregant educated on what's really going on, because all this is important. Because guess what? If our constitutional republic fails and communism succeeds, do you think they're going to be friendly to Christians?
Nope.
So that's what they need to realize, going forward, is this is the baseline. And we need to decide, which side of the fence that we're on here. And the thing about it is, there are people working in public schools. I have teachers all the time. I have teachers that send me, they're the whistleblowers in a lot of the things that I share on For Your Children. A lot of them have expressed, conversations with me. I'd love to get out of the public school system. I wished I knew a homeschool community where the parents would be willing to come in and hire me to tutor, X, Y, and Z. And so churches have to step up, and they have to be addressing these things. They have to get their congregations educated, about what's really going on. Because again, if we are not doing as Christians what we're called to do, which is equipping the saints,
right.
then we failed. And right now the church is failing, and it has been failing for years. And again, we're at a crisis level. So if you have someone that's listening to this and they would love for me to connect with their pastor, I would be happy to do that and have a conversation with them and attempt to get a seminar in their area and help them, set up some type of program, for resources for parents. We do that too with For Your Children. We just know that there needs to be, first you have to educate, and then you have to give them resources. And
right.
So, that's what we are committed to doing.
Well, we would love to work with you on getting a seminar set up way over here in East Tennessee sometime soon.
Yeah.
And you have filled us with so much information today. I would love to have you on and talk about all the other things you have coming on down the pipeline.
That would be wonderful.
I feel like you definitely fueled a fire in us.
Yeah.
This is why we started this podcast to begin with. So
fantastic.
I really appreciate all the information you've given us. And you answered every question. I don't even think we needed to ask you like 50 questions.
Hey, I'm good. One thing I can do is talk. And so now I've done this so long, I'm like, I had to go do an event and they wanted me to whittle it down to an hour. And I was like, that's not even possible. I pulled it off, but unfortunately they had way more questions after that 1 hour.
Right.
And then that went into like 2 hours of questions out in the parking lot after the event was already closed. And I'm like, if I had just had the full amount of time, I could have, covered this in detail. But yeah, it's just a matter of educating, but it has to be done quickly. Because they have had years to get ahead of the game. And this is a plan that they have been systematically executing. And we have been blind to it. And so they've been able to make, major strides. And we're just trying to play catch up.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has been enlightening, Tiffany. Yeah. I really appreciate you being on today.
Yes.
And we're going to have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And B, we are going to reach out to you about doing a seminar somewhere here on our side of the state.
Yes.
So
okay, that sounds great.
I really appreciate everything you've done for us today, and I'll be in contact with you soon.
That sounds great. It was nice to meet you, ladies. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Tiffany.
You too. Thanks.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, thanks for joining us here again today. I know that was a lot of information to take in. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us and listening to all the things coming down in legislation.
Yeah, Tiffany was full of a lot of information for sure. I feel like I wrote 2 pages of notes.
I know it's pretty scary to be honest.
I don't know. I feel like it like feels like I said fuels a fire. Like it makes you want to get involved. It makes you want to.
It definitely does.
You know.
Yeah. Yep. Well, so we'll put all of Tiffany's information in the links below. We would love for you to like and share and subscribe to our content. As always, please follow us on all of our social media posts. Did you want to share any? No.
I don't think I have that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, please follow us on our Facebook page, More Than Motherhood, Homeschooling More Than Motherhood, and then you can always find all of our links and all of our information on momsonthemic.com.
I feel like our brains are kind of mush. That was so
that was a lot of information.
Seriously. I mean, notes were. So if you're listening, well, I guess we should have done a warning at the beginning to bring it in because there's a lot of information.
Yes. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.